Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni viewer, and welcome to Non-Moving Pictures, where we examine movie posters as art. Today, we're going way back in the history of film to examine a poster for an iconic horror movie. Today, we are looking at the poster for Nosferatu.
And here it is. Now, I bet I know what your first thought was upon seeing this. What the heck am I even looking at? You're probably more familiar with this poster that represents Count Orlok in his more recognizable state, along with his familiars, the rats. But this thing, well, it's kinda weird looking. The landscape has a weird structure that doesn't mesh with the texture. There seems to be some kind of giant object attached to the back of the creature which looks more like a bat than a rat. And what the heck is this odd protuberance coming out of the face? Did the artist even see the movie? What's going on? Well, much like the film itself, the Nosferatu poster is an example of Expressionism. Now, I'm sure many of you have heard the word Expressionism thrown around when it comes to silent-era German horror movies. But what exactly does that mean? I've noticed quite a few dissertations on movies like Nosferatu and its contemporaries refer to them as examples of German Expressionism, but not many have actually gone into detail on what that means. Lucky for you guys, I'm here to help. In its most basic form, Expressionism is emotional art. It's not about the depiction of a scene or a person or an object, but about a feeling. As such, expressionistic art tends to be very exaggerated. An expressionist painting is not depicting what literally is, but how the mind interprets it. The most famous example would of course be The Scream. This image is not about a literal scene or a literal person. It's about what the person is feeling and how he perceives the world around him. He feels small and helpless and just plain mortified, because the world around him just isn't right. It's in constant turmoil, never ceasing, always moving, overwhelming him to the point where all he can do is, well, scream. So how does this apply to the Nosferatu poster? Well, being expressionistic, it's open to interpretation, but I think I have one which could explain it all. First of all, let's look at the weird, uneven staircase structure of the landscape. This represents the feeling of uneasiness. The outline is just close enough to resembling a staircase that your mind wants to accept it as such, but the angles are all wrong, which prevents the mind from accepting it. And if there's one thing the human mind hates, it's being unable to reconcile something. It makes the mind feel uneasy. The fact that the structure, if you can even call it that, is also asymmetrical and looks very unstable, further enhances the idea that something just isn't right. Whatever this is, you would not want to be walking on it. Getting to the vampire himself, the choice to make him bat-like, though inaccurate to the movie, is obvious. After all, everyone associates vampires with bats. But what is the deal with this elephant trunk? At no point in the movie does Count Orlok display something like this. So what gives here? Well, remember, this is Expressionism. We're not meant to be taking this image literally. Here's the thing about vampires. They are very intrusive beings. Strip away all the romanticism that's been heaped upon them in recent years, and you're left with creatures that are incredibly invasive. They drink blood, they control minds, they prey upon you in the most intimate ways. So does this represent that somehow? I think it might, and the detail which really pulls it together for me requires us to return to the landscape. You notice these odd, tenderly looking features? They don't quite mesh well with the sharp angles of the structure, yet they look as if they are alive, extending towards something, just like this weird proboscis. In fact, they're heading in the same direction. It almost is as if this mysterious figure is reaching out. And considering this action of reaching out is not being done with recognizable hands, but with strange, curvy, spindly tentacles, really makes the hair on your neck stand up. Ergo, I posit that Nosferatu's movie poster is portraying the intrusive horror of the vampire. It depicts the monster as the mind sees it, and since the mind is a potential target for the vampire to control, that's a very unsettling image indeed. And the strange object on the back? Well, that's meant to bring in the tragic aspect of the vampire. After all, vampires are as tragic as they are terrifying. When you watch the movie Nosferatu, you can't help but get the impression that Count Orlok's entire existence is pain. Despite the fact that he is evil to the core, his movement is stiff and slow. For this vampire, being undead is physically uncomfortable. The poster reflects this in a different way from the movie. Since it is a still image and therefore can't show a vampire moving around in an awkward manner, it instead represents the burden of being undead as a literal burden. The vampire is carrying his coffin on his back, like Christian from Pilgrim's Progress carrying his burden. It weighs him down, it hurts him, and yet he still moves forward. It's certainly not the obvious choice for a Nosferatu poster, but it still manages to tap into a primal part of my brain and make my skin crawl.
Probably not what you were expecting, was it? Now, there is, of course, a remake of Nosferatu that has its own movie poster, but I think I'll save that one for another day. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer, signing off. Next time, a poster for another classic monster movie. This one having perhaps done the most to completely alter the public perception of the monster it represents.